science. So today I would like to share a few important essentials and foundation about Stasis-Kinesis, what it is, what are the principles, and how it can help you, and also if you work with other people, how it can help them, and a little bit more of the details and the evolution of Stasis-Kinesis. So what is Stasis-Kinesis? Stasis in Greek means stance or a position, and kinesis means movement or dance. Yeah? So it's a stance, dance, or stillness sort of movement kind of practice. And in the world of stress and fast-paced communication, there is this longing for tranquility and peace. And Stasis-Kinesis, I believe, beautifully combines both movement and stillness to create this opportunity to release fear, relax from stress, and move into more congruent behaviors and more fruitful states, such as joy, happiness, lightness, peace, confidence, strength, and maybe even serenity or bliss. It's a practice that stems from Siberian dance. I come from Siberian sort of shamanic roots. There's an element of dynamic yoga in it, and also systemic family therapy that is a foundation piece created by Virginia Satir, the mother of family therapy, in the 60s, 70s, and based on her stances, communication stances. It's a very easy to practice method of self-expression, and also it's a method that helps create healthy dialogue between mind and body, and also helps mend and repair relationships. So of course, it's very beneficial for people who maybe suffer from low self-esteem or lack movement in everyday life, maybe suffer from mood swings, or they need that self-expression, or they feel maybe stuck in their life, or they may be going through the crossroad or a stressful period. Maybe they want to just get more joy and happiness, or maybe they just want to feel a little bit more, light and sense of freedom. So it is really looking at the body in a different way. It has some elements of sculpting, family sculpting. It's a process of looking at the family dynamic or behavior and using and working with our body to represent how we feel and what kind of relationship and dynamic we had or are having in our families. Sculpting is a therapeutic technique used in psychodrama to create a visual representation of a family system. It offers an opportunity to externalize sort of feelings and perceptions, or even expectations and longings that are embedded in the system's communication. So Stasis-Kinesis comes from this kind of integrative stance, combining effective research-based elements from a wide range of therapies: psychodynamic, cognitive behavior, experiential, person-centered, solution-focused, positive, transformational, and systemic, as well as somatic and interpersonal. It elegantly combines these different evidence-based tools to offer a powerful and bespoke method for different cases of mental health issues, as well as enrichment of relationships and with yourself, with ourselves, and others. Now, I mentioned these different words, and one of them is very important. It's called somatic experience, so somatherapy. It's an activity that is done directly by the body or on the body. It may include all forms of movement, touch, stretch, exercise, or any combination of them. So even a 10-minute walk has proven to help with cognitive, for example, ability to get better grades or better focus, solve problems more effectively. So we're building the Stasis-Kinesis practice on the healthy way of relating to the body. So somatherapy is also rooted in the ancient sort of Greek physician philosophers movement, Hippocrates, Praxagoras, Erasistratus, and Herophilus. They were mostly, they believed that a healthy body has a healthy mind. And they were big proponents of exercise and a healthy diet as a foundation for maintaining a healthy body, and has that somatherapy has a strong power to counteract the effect of sedentary lifestyle that is so detrimental to our health these days. Now let's look at some principles of the Stasis-Kinesis practice and their theoretical sort of underpinnings. What is it based on? Now, the movement, generally the movement has two directions: contracting, so we could use our body to contract ourselves, or to expand. So with Stasis-Kinesis, we always move towards expanding, but in order for us to appreciate the expansion, we first need to know how it is to contract. And Stasis-Kinesis is based on important principles of body movement. So the first one is that movement has two directions, but also as we move toward expanding, we also change physiology. We start with small movement exercises to allow the body to get in contact with itself. And then we move more towards self-expression and allowing the body to move in a large, let's say, movement kind of styles. Similar to the beginning of a dancing journey, you start with a little bit sort of like shy, maybe not so confident, but as you take practice further, you may want to experience the rhythm with more amplitude, of that, how the, following the body wishes and wants, and following that sort of flow. And changing physiology changes neurology. What does it mean? When we change the way how we are with our body, our neuron system changes. And with that, we change the mental states. So, for example, by moving the body, we also start feeling better, and we are getting to the outcome because our juices start flowing, with chronic stress or lack of somatherapy. That leads to illness, literally to illness of the body. As we start moving in a different way, we learn how to wire our neurons differently. And with that, we change the way how we feel and how we think and how we are. Another principle is that nonverbal communication is involuntary. What does it mean? Nonverbal communication is the way how we communicate with the body without words. We cannot help but communicating something. The way how we sit, the way how we stand, the way how we use our gestures, the way how we're using our muscles on our face, everything communicates. And of course, when we communicate, the other person who sees that, they also have an effect on themselves at communication, and their mirror neurons start doing something inside themselves, inside them, and that evokes, that triggers, and that's what happens. We become transformed through this practice by being in contact with other people, but also being in contact with other stances of ourselves when we're little, when we are stressed, or when we relax, when we imagine things, when we take different positions of the body, even imaginary positions, visualization, kind of visualizing, maybe dancing and pretending, but our body, you see, the body and the physiology, neurology, they just follow that lead. So if we put our shoulders, for example, down and open the chest, and we look up, we can feel much better than when we look down, or when we, for example, smile. There's a completely different feeling then when we don't smile, or when we put our hands and when we spread ourselves in a big position of the body, it feels very different to when we sort of hug ourselves and crawl into this embryo position, and when we feel small and we tuck ourselves and we hug a pillow. That feels very different on the inside. So we build on this and we use this kind of insights from the body work in Stasis-Kinesis work. And of course, the core is the coping stances, is that experiential practice the Stasis-Kinesis is built on. Now, I often start that part with the, say, preamble. All families communicate in some functional and some dysfunctional ways. For us to learn how to communicate better, we need to learn to cope with stress in a more congruent way. Experientially, we want to first understand these communication stances with our body, and then our mind can make a choice of which style and which strategy to choose. So let's start. And here are 5 classical communication coping stances that can be transformed from stress to flow. Okay, so the first is sort of started from a blaming. Everybody knows, or if not themselves, but they know somebody who's good at blaming other person or a situation or a circumstance of some sort. So a blaming stance or a blamer is a stance where that person takes a position of blaming someone or something else without taking responsibility for themselves. The underlying need, though, is to be protected, safe, and respected. Physically, the stance would be represented by a person pointing a finger with a stretched arm, leaning forward on one front leg. The front leg is sort of 1.5 shoulders lengths apart and slightly bent, and a back hand is on the waist. The feeling in this position is not balanced and strains on the shoulders. Now, if you just do that and experience how it is to blame somebody, you will notice that there's a lot of strain in the shoulders. And a lot of people who get angry, they complain about pain in their shoulders, interestingly. Now, the opposite of that blaming stance is a flow stance of a peaceful warrior. And it's an antidote to the blamer. It is a position that is driven by the need for protection and safety, similar to blamer, but it is more congruent. Physically, the stretched arm goes up above the head with an open palm and the tip of the fingers facing up. So looking above and smiling maybe, you just feel how from the blamer you turn into like in yoga, a peaceful warrior. It's a bit more strong and energetic. Now, the second pair is called placata and poetry. So placata, it's a stress stance, and it's normally when we take a blame on us. It's a stance when a person takes the position of a victim and takes full responsibility for themselves and more. The underlying need is for love and care, as well as strength and stability. Physically, the stance would be represented by a person bending one knee and putting it on the ground and looking from down up, making a begging sign with their sort of hands, as though asking for forgiveness. And the upper body and head slightly bent on one side, palms are open facing up. A position is not comfortable and strains one side of the body, which is bent. Now, in that position, a lot of people complain their neck pain or the back pain, sometimes even leg pain. So when they're not physically like that, but just the placating stance and communication, chronic communication placating, they also tend to experience this kind of struggles in their body. Interesting to notice that soma dynamic in play here. Now, the flow is the opposite stance of the placata is called the poetry. And when I created the opposite stances, it's just to help us move from stress to flow. And that's where the Stasis-Kinesis really takes the space, because it's a beautiful practice to move and experience the antidotes. So it is a position that helps create balance and brings stability and strength to the body. Physically, it would be represented by standing up from a placating stance and raising both straight arms above the head. Feet, shoulders width apart, head looking straight with a slight smile. For an advanced position, one can bend one leg and put a foot on the inner thigh of the other leg. It's almost like a yoga position, you know, of the tree. And the feeling is so different. Wow. When a placator creates the power on the inside, and you just do that and experience how it feels, you will know and you will never forget. The third pair is called super reasonable humble monk. The stress stance of super reasonable, or a computer, some in Virginia's books, is a stance when a person hides real emotions behind logic and facts. A computer generally prefers to use a monologue or a critique when under stress. The underlying need is for understanding and wisdom, as well as for being in peace. Physically, that is represented by folded arms and one arm's pointy fingers touching a cheek or finger pointing towards the ceiling. It's kind of like a body weight is on one leg, creating an unbalanced position for the body, but the person is closed. Now, the flow stance of a humble monk is an antidote to super reasonable stance. The body becomes straight and palms touch the heart's level in the namaste sign, and head facing straight with a slight smile and maybe even moving forward, just bending. And it's great for those of us who are in our heads, super reasonable, without facing any feelings, to become that humble monk stance and feel how it feels to just bow towards our interlocutor, towards our friend and who we're talking to. Now, the fourth dichotomy is called distractor core harmonizer. A stress stance of a distractor is a position when a person doesn't want to face a tough reality and prefers to deviate to a different topic and hides a feeling behind another agenda. A person generally brings humor or skips difficult subjects, even adds chaos to create emotional stability and harmony without initiating a conflict. Physically, that would be represented by a person moving arms in front of other people's faces to distract their attention, slightly bent on one side and looking from down up, laughing. It's almost like a clown. It's like, oh, let's not talk about this. How's the weather today? Or, let's have a cup of coffee, but never actually faces the real problem. Now, the flow as the co-harmonizer is an antidote to distracting stance. It is a stable and harmonious position that helps a person feel courage and peace with a tough reality around them. Physically, arms relaxed, palms open up, body strengthens and finds its core, similar to like a Tai Chi position, neutral position when you have slightly bent knees and straight spine. And that's when you feel your core. You don't need to just move in chaotic, sort of distracting style. And the final dichotomy, withdrawer, world hugger. Withdrawing stance is a stance when a person moves away from discussing a difficult situation and stops talking and shuts down from external reality. Here come all the addictions or divorces or disappearances or even suicides. These are withdrawals on different spectrum, but what it is just moving away and running away from a problem. The underlying need here is for trust, openness, and touch, the very things a person moves away from, which is counterintuitive. Physically, the stance is represented by folded arms and turning away from the other person. And the flow, a world hugger stance, is the antidote to the withdrawing stance. Instead of moving away, the world hugger moves in and opens her arms as though they want to hug the whole world. It is a resourceful stance of hugging that is considered to be connected to a hug hormone called oxytocin. So these are 5 stances, both stress and flow, creating stasis-kinesis. Now, the somatic practice of moving the body actually is very important, not just to hear it, but try to move your body too, because it creates a bridge between unconscious behavior and stress and conscious reconstructed reality to bring the family system in balance. Now, we sometimes work in groups, right, in big groups, but mostly we work in triads, in groups of 3. Now, each group chooses who will be the who will be playing a child, and then a child's mother and a child's father. Normally, it's kind of a classical family structure. Now, of course, recently we have also added the surrogacy or the single parent, but always a single parent has the other parent, because it takes an egg and a sperm to create a child. Now, it may be that biologically there was a sperm and an egg, but actually the family, it may be a lesbian or gay family, it may be adopted a child, maybe a foster child. It covers all sort of variations. But what we're talking about is, for example, if a child was adopted, they were still parents. They just became an adopted withdrawal stance, both of them. So we would represent that in as a mother and father adopting that withdrawal stance, and the role model, the play would be from the withdrawal to world hugger. So the child can experience this new reconstructed reality that they probably have never experienced in real life. But what we know is magic, that once we experience it in our body, once we imagine, once we experience something different, our neurons know, and they connect, and when they wire together, they fire together, and they create that new circuitry. And that's what is something that we've discovered in neuropsychology, neuroscience, that the more we practice healing methods, healing modalities, especially this integrative movement modalities, the faster we heal and rebuild and repattern and transform our broken links, so to say. So reconstruction happens through body movements, and a lot of dance therapists know that when they see anecdotal evidence in most cases, or case studies where the person recovers from a mystery disease, or they recover their relationship after a prolonged dancing practice. Of course, it's not like a one-off quick fix kind of thing. It takes some consciousness, it takes some mediation, it takes some facilitation. It also takes some processing, because what we want to do is to connect the left hemisphere with the right hemisphere in the practice that combines both. And in this case, Stasis-Kinesis does exactly that. It creates a practice that combines both. So neurology and neurobiology of stress, when we have the tense and tightening muscles, we of course activate our fight or flight response, and our vagus nerve and the sympathetic nervous system becomes activated. Also, the dorsal vagus nerve gets activated sometimes, and it shuts down the system, which turns into depression and disconnection, that withdrawal. Or it can turn into sympathetic reaction like a distractor, or it could turn into a blamer, a fighting response. So what we want to do is to calm and soothe our vagus nerve, and from dorsal vagus we want to turn into a ventral vagus, when we feel open, when we feel connected, when we feel relaxed, when we feel the trust and sort of the juices flowing again. Now, of course, it's a bit of work to do, right? So it's not like we can do it in one day. So let me share my screen, and you can see how that works schematically as well. So Hopefully you can see this little graph that I've created, and it's based on the Satir change process, okay, where we have the time at the bottom and then the productivity on the vertical line. And we always start in the old status quo. Now, at some point, there is some enriching element or the foreign element that comes in to change something. It may be a forced change or a desired change, doesn't matter. But there's some resistance generally always from our mind that is busy doubting or busy conflicting or busy finding problems. And once resistance is over, there's generally a bit of chaos, right? The chaos that is a very low productivity moment, but in every change process, it's required. And at some point, we turn into this integration of a new status quo, and we go to a new behavior. So Stasis-Kinesis is built on the Satir change model. Of course, we expect at some point there's chaos in the process when we start looking at the family of origin dynamic, and we're realizing, oh my gosh, that's what my parents did. When we ask the triad to work out for that, let's say, star, what was the what was the coping behavior of your mother? What was the coping behavior of your father when they were in conflict with each other? And out of this 5, blamer, placator, super reasonable, distractor, withdrawer. And when we put it together, and here I would like to show you an example of the triad, which is a possibility of different, of 5, right? A possibility of 5. You have, for example, here, parent 1, super reasonable, parent 2, distractor, and a child adopting a blamer stance. Now, this is kind of the 3 hexagons in the middle, the triangle. That's a blueprint. It's a stress blueprint of this particular family unit where a child grew up. And once we know that, we know how to help this child, even if they're not child anymore, if they're grown up. So let me give you a couple of examples. So here, for example, it's a combination of 3 blamers, red. It also has a color to it, so it's easier to understand. And that's how we teach Stasis-Kinesis for practitioners. So parent 1, parent 2 are both blamers, and the child is blamer. This triad is fighting a fire, a feisty relationship full of turbulence and conflict. Hard to stay relaxed and calm in this family unit. One of the 3 members of the triad will keep stirring the fire to experience anger, to release it. This is done to protect the needs, either personal or of the family. It's quite tiring to fight after some time, although initially it can feel quite exciting, significant, or even purposeful. Learning how to turn blamer into a peaceful warrior is the next step for this family. Funneling all this active and strong energy into a common cause. Becoming a leader of a meaningful project could be a good change. Learning to connect with calm people and nurturing is a possible solution. Family therapy, systemic work, and ground oneself in a soothing practice, be it meditation or listening to music, swimming, relaxing, reading, journaling, and breathing exercises. And a couple more. For example, here you see both parents, well, let's take another with not both parents are blamers. For example, one parent is super reasonable, one parent is a blamer, and the child also super reasonable. In this family constellation, the child sides with the super reasonable parent as though she says, I long for your love, so I will be like you. 2 super reasonable people can have a functional and practical relationship, but they often lack the deeper connection and the longing for being accepted, touched, seen, and validated. The blaming parent becomes the emotional outlet and provokes the other 2 family members to raise the game of dialogue to show some emotions. But often the answers of super reasonable only aggravate the blaming parent even more. Often the dialogues become passive-aggressive with a lot of sarcasm and judgment without showing emotions on the super reasonable front. Taking the position of a judge makes the angry person even angrier. The transformation can happen in many ways. For example, for a super reasonable to admit their lack of emotions and hold physically to soothe the blamer. So just hold, just hug physically. To connect eyes to eyes, to listen quietly to the emotions of the blamer, for the latter to breathe. So for the blamer to breathe in and out deeply after taking a cooling pause to calm down. Having a dialogue in a more congruent, calm way would be a good start to express the longings and yearnings, expectations, and needs. And another example is when a parent one is a blamer, for example, parent is super reasonable and child a placater. In this family triad, all three members display different coping strategies under stress. The child plays a placater role, taking the blame and criticism, reducing her self-esteem for the benefit of her parents, mostly without being aware of that. A blaming parent feels much more peaceful with a placating child, as the trigger point has diminished and reduced with the placating stance. In some cases, though, blamer feels more empowered to blame the little child even more. Emotional release from a parent to a child, scapegoating or shaming are the troubling sides of this family triad. Unbeknownst to the parents, the child becomes the emotional waste container. Eventually, the little placater either gets sick and physically or emotionally and becomes such a wreck that problems start becoming more of a mental health illness. Family therapists will be of help to assist the child to get their self-esteem back so that they can form their congruent and leveled communication stance to counterbalance the triad dynamic. Now, these are just examples of different variations of this fascinating dynamic among the three people, a mama, papa, child. And there are more than 50 different variations and all have different story, kind of say. All of these have different flavor. And of course, they vary from one to another, but there are some interesting core dynamics that we notice based on our practice in this field. And of course, we could do different work. It can work individually, like you see here, with different figurines and different statuettes or shapes and forms and just things that a person has available, even through online. We can also use some of the objects. You see here a little cable dividing the space between one person and another person, and depicting through color, through direction, where they're looking, through space and distance in between them, and how it feels when things change, when some other objects are added. So these dynamics, they have an ability to change shape and form, and with that we change the emotions, we change the thought processes, we change the feelings, and eventually the reality of our life, because our behavior is just a habitual stance that we take. So if we change a stance, we can change the whole dynamic of the relationship, even if the other person has no idea that we've been working on it and they do nothing. It's if only one person changes, the whole structure, the whole system changes. That's the beauty and magic of it. And so there's so many different examples, so many beautiful representations of this integration of conscious and unconscious processes. And I'm working on the manual for therapists and counselors and psychologists to learn how to be certified in this new modality called Stasis-Kinesis Integrative Movement Therapy. Okay, and we want to do also, according to the research, so we want to publish this work. Hence, I'm inviting everybody who's if you experience stress, anxiety, and depression, just try this method. It only takes 2 hours for a workshop to be conducted. And of course, if there's an opportunity to come to one of our retreats, I highly advise you to do so and invite you to come into one of our beautiful locations in Greece. Anyway, this is what I wanted to share about the practice of Stasis-Kinesis, and just to whet your appetite so that you can explore more, find out more, connect with Stasis-Kinesis practice, and check our website, virginiasatir.co.uk. It's the website of our Institute of Virginia Satir in the UK, and I look forward to connecting with you. Have a great day.